Good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation of Music from the Western Reserve. I'm Zsolt Bognar, the Artistic Director and General Manager of the series, proudly presenting to you tonight Part 2 of Daniel Shapiro's Beethoven Traversal. There's a lot of great music tonight, so we'll get right into it. I just quickly wanted to mention that tonight's concert sponsor is Dr. Linda McDonald, and we also invite you to consider your support at musicwr.org. And we invite you to grab your favorite drink, enjoy a marathon concert of 5 Beethoven sonatas, including, last but not least, the fifth of these is the mighty Opus 101 Sonata, one of the most difficult sonatas ever written. We hope you enjoy, and we invite you to stay tuned now for our conversation with Daniel Shapiro. Thank you.
Dr. Shapiro, thank you so much for joining us here for our second installment of your Beethoven Traversal. Welcome back.
Thank you. Always good to see you. It's great to be back.
Well, we're lucky here at Music from the Western Reserve that we get to hear so many Beethoven sonatas from you, and they're all so diverse. So in this part two, if you will, I'm just looking at the program and seeing 5 sonatas this time. So this is a heroic undertaking. First of all, how brave do you feel these days? Is this
Not
a reaction
especially.
against what we're going through in the world today?
Well, I figured, I do 5 one night, then I'll have to do 3 some other night. So, but no, in truth, these the Opus 10s are not as long as the Opus 31s, for example, and Opus 78 is one of the very shortest ones. So it's not quite as daunting as it might appear on paper.
Well, let's talk about that Opus 78 sonata, because this is not a work that is frequently heard as far as I know. And it's in 2 movements, and I think it's undeservedly maybe labeled as one of the smaller sonatas, but I think it might be shorter in duration, but I think it encompasses really the full range of the really large sonatas.
Yes, remarkably concentrated and remarkably, it's personal. One of his most, you could say, personal of sonatas, and it's a special world. This piece. One thing, the key is so unique. F sharp major, uh, and that opening, you know, horn trio, as if calling out to a distant beloved.
Yeah.
uh, so there's an intimacy, a personal quality, a simplicity uh, that is really quite extraordinary. Yeah, and he does manage to say a tremendous amount within a few short minutes. And the second movement is full of humor. There's the main theme has a kind of passing reference to Rule Britannia, uh, on which he wrote a set of really quirky variations. Uh, and this second movement, it's only a one of his few 2 movement sonatas. It's also full of humor, and a lot of it comes from these little 2 note slurs. These uh, pairs of notes with a little slur, which he himself really wanted to be kind of compressed with a little space in between each pair. And I think, from my point of view, I think one really should go with that. And many pianists are a little shy about doing that, but I think it adds tremendous lightness and humor when one really does that.
Yeah, humor is a subject that's so fascinating to Beethoven, because if we think of some of the catchier moments, the opening of the Fifth Symphony, for example, we think of a Beethoven and certainly how he's portrayed, this bust over my shoulder as an example that Beethoven, everything is taken so seriously as the risk, but humor is also just as important to his character and his music.
Yeah, he was one person who, I mean, many great artists and composers, find and express, transcendence through overcoming hardship and grief and despair, which Beethoven did aplenty. But he was also one who could find transcendence through humor, and often something very humorous, a movement or a variation or something, will be followed by something that's uh, unearthly, transcendent. This happens a lot in the Diabelli variations, which is kind of his, apotheosis of humor. Uh, and what we heard last time in the first Western Reserve recital, the Opus 31. Sorry, no, that was the second recital. The Opus 31, number 1 sonata. The first movement is just absurd and hilarious, but that leads to the transcendent second movement.
Yes.
So it's another road for him to transcendence is through humor.
Well, and then I feel like these huge contrasts really bring out the elements of the others, and I think Beethoven was a master of contrasts.
Yes, and of variety, but whatever particular corner of the cosmos this varietal work happens to be, he forms its own mini cosmos on that one kind of thing, which is so extraordinary.
So next we have the 3 sonatas, Opus 10. So these are really challenging to perform, but they're so exciting. What do we have to know about? Let's start with the first one, Opus 10, number 1.
Well, this is the characteristic C minor, and it's this C minor. I mean, it is most impetuous, energetic. The quintessential C minor of Beethoven. But I think what also feels is that the themes, the motives, the ideas, they almost sound to me like proclaiming brief philosophical ideas or concepts in tones. Shouting from the rooftops, be truthful or whatever it might happen to be, or idea A or idea B. We can never know exactly what it is, but there's this sense of proclamation of these wonderful ideas. And the second movement is one of his extraordinary adagios, almost spun out to infinite length. Not that it seems long, but
Yeah.
But where he really, goes to the depths of the human soul. And it's also in A flat major, which is the key where he writes his most beautiful melodies, and he's at his warmest.
Yeah.
And the last movement, maybe the only thing to say about it, other than that it's very brief, is that it doesn't end the way we might expect the sonata to end. I don't want to give away the ending.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, it presages the way the end of the Opus 111 sonata ends as well. So there's that to be said.
Now, Opus 10 number 2 and Opus 10 number 3 are works that I've performed quite a bit. Opus 10 number 2, the F major, that's another example of where humor really comes into play, I believe. But it's so fascinating because at the same time, that slow movement is mysterious, enigmatic, and full of depth and pain, and even moments of warmth with that D flat section. So we're getting technical for our viewers, but the point I'm trying to bring across is that there is a really full range of life experience here in an early opus number at this juncture in Beethoven's life. We're really getting his full world.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting. You could think of the just this occurred to me. This 10 number 2 is sort of the inverse image of the moonlight, because the moonlight have 2 movements of complete despair and torment with a ray of light and warmth in the short middle movement. And here we have 2 rather funny movements, and in between them we have this very dark, brooding movement, which is yet at the same time it's also a dance. So it's not quite as despairing, I suppose, as number 3, which we'll get to. But also the humor of 10 number 2, the first move, there's something sophisticated and refined and sly about the kind of humor that is there. It's not just kind of the laugh out loud belly laugh. It's more subtle, the humor, but definitely humorous. The last movement is more of a traditional ha 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 kind of thing.
Exactly. Even the way that piece ends is a little unexpected. Yes, and we'll
Yeah.
And we can leave it at that. Opus 10, number 3. That is suddenly a larger work. What do we have to
Yes.
know about this piece?
Uh, boy. Uh, it's one of the extraordinary motivic integration where you find motives tossed about in the same motives in all four movements. That's one interesting thing. Uh, and in general, it's a four movement symphonic structure that kind of hangs together as one large artistic journey or artistic statement. And I think this is, one early example of this, maybe not the first, but I think what makes Beethoven a pioneer is that the degree to which he unifies movements of the sonata into a single artistic statement, a single artistic vision, rather than three or four separate things. You really feel there's a unity to the whole thing.
And I'm
Uh,
thinking that might actually be a good guide for our listeners who are listening to our conversation and trying to keep track and remember individual discussions of individual movements. Is that I can't possibly remember all of that, but that might be a guide in terms of how to listen to Beethoven, just
right.
coming to it at a certain moment. What do you hope to get from your listeners? How should we respond? Is it through intellect? Is it through heart? Is it the combination of both? How does this work in listening to Beethoven?
I would think absolutely the combination of both. It, it obviously it excites and arouses our emotion, but it also somehow, if it's a good performance, one should feel somehow enlightened and liberated somehow, and somehow, yeah, to feel ennobled, yeah, enlightened, liberated, inspired, uh, uh, as well as perhaps moved. I mean, certainly like the slow movement of 10 number 3 is,
I was
really
just
a work
about
of
to say
profound grief.
profound
Yeah.
grief, and yet going through that huge kind of cathartic journey of that slow movement of Opus 10, number 3, at the same time going through it and emerging, and then going to the ray of light that comes after it in the third movement. This really changes us as the listener, and for
Yes.
I can only speak for myself as the performer as well, and I would imagine that's the case for you too.
Yes. But also, I should say that the reverberations, you could say, of the slow movement are not entirely lost, and it causes the last movement to be ended, not maybe in the way as one might think the last movement to a big sonata would end. We haven't entirely forgotten the slow movement.
You know, it occurred to me about the last movement of Opus 10, number 3, that if we think of these little motives, the musical gestures, they sometimes seem to ask a question, and sometimes it seems as though he's asking more questions than he poses answers to.
Yes, very true.
Just a,
Absolutely.
a thought-provoking idea.
Yeah,
Okay,
wonderful, wonderfully expressed.
so Opus 101. Now this piece really takes the cake. What do we have to know about this? I think people usually talk about the Hammerklavier as being a Mount Everest, but I think in its own way, this is another Mount Everest. What's going
Yes.
on in this piece?
Well, at first, I would say that one could argue which is the most difficult of the 32, whether it's 106 or 101. Arguments can be made for both.
Mhm.
There's something subtle and slippery about it. It's very hard to grasp. Even if one thinks one understands it, it still somehow can be elusive.
Yeah.
A little bit. I remember Alfred Brendel once said about the Schumann concerto that it's like the John Hancock building in Chicago. When you think you're getting close to it, you're still not that close to it.
It's funny that this was Alfred Brendel
Yes.
speaking about Chicago. It's funny because the first time I heard this work was Alfred Brendel in Chicago.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
it was that recital, and the reason I'm bringing this up is it was that recital of him performing 5 Beethoven sonatas. This would have been in 1995, 25 years ago. It was his traversal of this music that made me decide on that spot that being a performer was really what I
Wow.
wanted to do, because I experienced, and tonight we're hearing 5 sonatas as presented by you. Within 5 different works is a whole range of life experience. Um, Beethoven's world enables us to feel, enables us to think and reflect. It's all there. This is why I
Yes.
wanted to become a musician. Beethoven.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Me too. I think. Yeah. Started with Beethoven very, very early on. Uh,
So Opus 101. I mean, how does that work? Do you just basically have to cross yourself before you start, or?
well, like anything, one has to study the work, consider the work, reflect on the work, practice it, and yeah, and hope that one can find the thread that particular evening to find the right sound to begin it with. Uh, it's even the instruction for the first movement, with animation yet with the most intimate sentiment. Uh, and of course, the piece begins, this is a bit more technical, it doesn't begin on the tonic, it begins on the dominant. And in a certain sense, although it does resolve on the way a few times, it doesn't really, the whole piece to a certain extent is about really trying to resolve firmly into A major. Uh, and the last movement, kind of with its instructions, with decidedness, there's less about it. There is really says, yes, we now are resolving to A major. Uh, and even there, with the third, and then only at the end of the piece is it resolved. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but that's one of the strands, one of the that makes the piece a kind of journey. But it's very warm, very affectionate, and very human. He wrote it for Dorothea von Ertmann, who was a good friend of his and a terrific pianist by all accounts. Uh, and you really have a feeling of a work written for a good friend of many years. This kind of friendship and warmth uh, that pervades the whole piece.
Now, before we let you go, and I know that we all want to get into the music right away, but there's something that I wanted to ask you about, because this is going to date me, but 20 years ago when I was in your freshman colloquium class, one of the things you did frequently was play various recordings for us, and that included operatic works, but also you played some recordings of the great uh, interpreter of Beethoven, Artur Schnabel. And this was really the first time that I had heard 1 or 2 recordings of his before, but this really opened up a world to me. What was the significance of Schnabel and his ideal of Beethoven interpretation? The point I'm trying to make is, by today's standards, his recordings might sound on some level uneven, and yet there isn't much out there that's more glorious at the same time.
That's right. No, he continues to be one of the big influences in my life, not only because I studied with some student of his, but the approach, the whole Schnabel school of thought. And this is what I was alluding to before about when you listen to Schnabel's performance, you feel enlightened and liberated, and your awareness is heightened, your awareness of existence is heightened. And I think that's really what Beethoven was after. Uh, and so not that's what I try to do, not obviously in exactly the same way as Schnabel. I don't want to imitate him, but very much this kind of ecstatic uh, lifting up kind of spirit of Schnabel is so much what this is all about, and what inspires me as I study him and as I study Beethoven.
Well, where both you and I are trying to come up with adequate words to describe this music, I'm so happy that now we get to hear it. And we're so grateful to have you here as part of our series. And we wish you continued health and safety and much inspiration with your Beethoven traversal.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and let's enjoy this.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. We invite you to sit back, not quite relaxed, because this invites a total concentrated experience, but we invite you to enjoy this presentation of 5 Beethoven sonatas by Daniel Shapiro. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me. And hope we all look forward to this Beethovenian feast.
We thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've certainly heard some of the greatest music ever written. Proudly presented here by Music from the Western Reserve, we invite you to consider your support at musicwr.org. I'm Zsolt Bognar, Artistic Director and General Manager of the series, wishing you a good night and a very happy and safe holiday.
This has been a Buford T. Hedgehog, a Step Up the Stream event production.